Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to study about discovery of cells. So let's begin. So cell was discovered between the year of 1600 to 1700. So this cell discovery started with the discovery of compound microscope by a Dutch spectacle maker called Zacharias Janssen in 1590. So when compound microscope was discovered, it was really famous within the scientists, and every scientist were interested in that because they wanted to see different types of things by using this microscope. So here can you see this one? The microscope which is shown here in the picture. So it is the eyepiece and the objective. So as you can see here, this was the first microscope which was invented by Zacharias Janssen. But let me tell you, there were three Dutch spectacle makers who were behind this invention. So the first was Hans Janssen, his son Zacharias Janssen, and Hans Lippershey. Okay, so there were three scientists who were behind this invention. Okay, so the first portrayal of a microscope was drawn about 1631 in the Netherlands. So the complete structure was drawn and was portrayed by Zacharias Janssen. That's why his name is taken as he was the first person to invent microscope. Okay. So now we're going to talk about another Dutch scientist who discovered his own microscope in late 1600, and he was Antony von Leeuwenhoek. So he invented his own microscope, that was compound microscope, in 1600s. So here you can see the microscope which he has invented. Okay, you can see this. So basically he was not the scientist at that time because he never went to school, and he doesn't knew any other languages other than the Dutch language. So you can see his invention. Here is the microscope which he has invented. So Antony von Leeuwenhoek made his microscope by using glass pearls, as you can see here, that was commonly used in the textile shop at that moment or at the time. It was used to see the good quality of the clothes, and Antony von Leeuwenhoek was working in the textile shop at that time. So his microscope was capable of magnifying objects by a factor of about 200 to 300. Apparently, he discovered the microscope to see a good quality of clothes. He never revealed his theories on making his microscope. So here are some points. That is, Antony von Leeuwenhoek was born in October 24, 1632, Delft, Netherlands, and he died in August 26, 1723, Delft. He was a Dutch microscopist who was the first to observe bacteria and protozoa. Now, where he observed bacteria and protozoa, we're going to study further. Okay. Now let's pause the story of the Antony von Leeuwenhoek here. Now, in the same era, another scientist called Robert Hooke discovered his own microscope, and that microscope can magnify by the factor of 40 to 50. You can see the microscope here. Again, this scientist was not the biologist. He was more interested in physics. He also discovered Hooke's law and balance spring in 1600s. So what he did here, he discovered the compound microscope, and he used this microscope to see almost everything he could see under the microscope. After taking all the observation which he saw under his microscope, he wrote a book called Micrographia of Minute Bodies. See the book here? It is a picture of the original book. It's Micrographia of Minute Bodies. Now, this book was a hot sell at that time, not because of the latest information that had in that time, but also the folded pictures that were present in his book. And these pictures were showing all the minute details of all the organisms he watched under his microscope. So can you see the pictures? It was so nicely it is drawn, and you can see the minute details he mentioned in his book. Here the line I have mentioned, Hooke's 1665 book Micrographia, he described observations with microscopes and telescopes, contains the earliest of all the observed microorganisms. And he also discovered microfungus, which is mucor. Okay, so let's see the pictures which he mentioned in his book. The organism which he saw under his microscope was the first flea. So you can see this is a drawing of a flea. This is the original drawing drawn by Robert Hooke, and this is the picture I have mentioned, the original, like the real picture. Okay, this was a drawing drawn by Robert Hooke, and this is the real picture. So he mentioned in his book a flea which he saw under his microscope. What all he saw? He saw a grey drone fly. His head. He saw his head. It was fully so mind. You can see it's very clearly drawn by him, and this is a real picture of drone fly. Okay. Next, he saw blue fly. You can see. If you want, I can increase picture size. You can see nicely now. So this is the blue fly, and this is the original picture of the blue fly. Okay. Now the next was next was bee sting. He saw the bee sting and he drew the picture of the bee sting. Now this is the real picture, and this is the original book picture which Robert Hooke drew in his book. Okay, and the next one is the next was gnat insect. This is the picture of gnat which he mentioned in his book, and this is the real picture. So you can see how minute details he had mentioned everything. Okay, I can see nicely. So the next was after gnat, he observed ant. He observed ant. So this is the real picture of his book, and this is the real picture. Okay. The next was Hooke's drawing of crystal taken from frozen urine. So this is the picture. This is the real picture he drew. Okay. So this is the crystal taken from frozen urine. Okay. These are the drawings he mentioned here. You can see both are original. And the last was cork. When he watched the slice of a cork under a microscope, he saw these minute honeycomb-like structure. Can you see? These minute honeycomb-like structures. Okay, so this is how cell was discovered. So the cells are the basic structure and function unit of life. I've already told. The term cell was first coined in 1665 by a British scientist, Robert Hooke. So how he discovered? You got to know, right? He was the first scientist to study living things under a microscope and examined a thin slice of cork under a microscope and observed honeycomb-like structure. As I have already explained here, that he observed honeycomb-like structure here. Can you see? This is the original book picture I have mentioned here. Okay, this is the zoom one. This is the book. So you can see the structures here. It is the same structure you can see in the honeycomb. So that's why he called this as honeycomb-like structure. And these compartments, which is visible, he called these as cell. Okay. So you can note down this. You can stop the video and you can note down it. Now we will talk about again Anton von Leeuwenhoek, which we paused the story before. I hope you remember. So we're going to talk about him again. As Anton Leeuwenhoek was from same era, he saw the book, but he can't read that book as I've already mentioned that he only knew Dutch language and he never went to school. So I hope you remember that. But he saw the pictures, right? I've shown you that there were pictures mentioned in the Robert Hooke's book. So he saw all the pictures and he was really impressed by those pictures. So he started making observation what he saw under his own microscope, as same as Robert Hooke. And after And after observing, he started writing letters to the Royal Society of London. So you can see this was the original letter he wrote to Royal Society of the London. Okay, and this was in the Dutch language because he didn't know any other language. So he wrote these letters in Dutch language, and later it was translated into English and was published. The first observation he made in pond water, and he made a diagram in his book. So that showed rotifers, Vorticella, and Hydra. So these all are the organisms which were seen by Anton von Leeuwenhoek under his microscope, and he drew the diagram which he mentioned in his book. Now these three organisms comes under protist. Okay. He also replicated some of the Robert Hooke's work like bee sting. You can see the drawing. This is the drawing of Anton von Leeuwenhoek. Okay, that drawing which I showed you before, that was the drawing of Robert Hooke, same as bee sting. He also observed bee sting under the microscope, which he mentioned in his letter to the Royal Society of London. In 1674, he also observed and discovered the shape and size of the red blood cell. Okay, so he actually discovered these by observing in his own microscope. This was the same era which was going on, same as Robert Hooke's. Okay, he was discovering his own things, and Antony von Leeuwenhoek was discovering his own. Then in 1676, okay, then in 1676, he took the plague out of his own teeth. Observed that plague under the microscope, and then he saw some minute creatures which was moving inside the microscope, and he estimated that it would be 10,000 of them to fill the volume of the small grain of sand. You can understand, 10,000. So it was too small, and it was looking clumsy, and it was moving. Okay, like this. So he called them living animalcules. So he called them living animalcules because they were moving like an animal. Okay, so this is the picture. This is the original picture from his book. So he mentioned different kind of animalcules which he observed under the microscope. Okay, so he drew and sent this letter to the Royal Society, and that's how bacteria was discovered. Now maybe you have understood why I have mentioned here that he was the Dutch microscopist who was the first to observe bacteria and protozoa. Okay, so he observed bacteria and protozoa. Now let's talk about bacteria, just an introduction. So the bacteriology is the branch of microbiology dealing with the study of bacteria. So the study of bacteria is known as bacteriology. Okay. Now the first person to see the microorganisms was probably the Dutch naturalist, because I've already explained he was not a biologist because he never went to school. Antony von Leeuwenhoek, who in 1683 described some animalcules, as they were then called, in water and saliva and other substances, as he observed all those protestas in water, and he observed bacteria in his saliva or plaque which he took from his teeth. I've already mentioned, right? So just to show you that what he observed was a different kind of bacteria, and the shape were different. So here you can see the sphere shaped, rod shaped bacteria and spiral shaped bacteria. So the sphere shaped bacteria is known as cocci, rod shaped bacteria is known as bacilli, and spiral shaped bacteria is known as spirochetes. Okay, now we're gonna see protista or protozoa, which was also discovered by Antony von Leeuwenhoek. So protozoology, the study of protozoans. So the science had its beginning in the 17th century when Antony von Leeuwenhoek first discovered or observed protozoans by means of his invention, the microscope. Okay, the exactly science and biology was very much interesting, became interesting when these organisms were discovered. Okay, so you can see the picture. It is already, I have taken this picture to make you understand the types also. So this is how protista or protozoa is seen. So here we completed with the discovery of the cell, and next we're gonna study about cell theory. So please like and subscribe my video so that you will get a notification about my new videos. Okay, thank you. Bye bye.